Borderlands 4's release is just around the corner and the hype train has left the station. Now there's a lot of info out there, but it can be hard to sift through every little thing. So in this video today, I want to help you in deciding on which Vault Hunter to play come launch. Now I've already played Borderlands 4, so I'll be giving you my impressions on some of the stuff I've played with and how to interact with things, but we'll be mainly using websites to talk about the skills of the hunters, as well as the gameplay trailers to give you a sense of what those skills look like. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by upfronting the knowledge of my videos. So let me do that by summarizing each one of the hunters now. Let me start out by saying there's no easy analog for these characters. I'm going to use generic D&D or maybe Diablo classes to help draw a parallel, but there's a lot of nuance and freedom in builds across all three of the skill trees for all four of the characters. And there's modifiers that you can really go crazy with a lot of this. So starting off, Amon, the Forgeknight, focuses on summoning axes that are imbued with frost or fire elements, surging forward with his fists, or using a shield to basically turn him into Brigitte or Reinhardt from Overwatch. Definitely more of a brawler style of character. He has a lot of tankiness attached to him. If you want skills that are more melee focused, with some medium range play and some minor minion summoning, as well as defensive elements in his Scourge line, Amon is your guy. Rafa, the Exo-Soldier, is a much faster paced character, stacking massive speed buffs using his overdrive capability that happens whenever he uses a skill. Overdrive can be augmented across all three of his lines, but abilities give him cannons on his back like an Iron Man suit, or huge scything blades that allow him to reap through tons of monsters. I look at him as almost like a ranger type of character, fast paced with both melee and ranged abilities, and some summoning built into either his turret or drone skills, which we'll talk about in a bit. Taking a hard left turn, Harlowe, the Gravitar, has a lot of crowd control and ranged abilities that entirely manipulate the battlefield, with some of the only overt support abilities in the game as well. She can resurrect down players at range, drop a bunch of environmental hazards, teleport and displace enemies, and her passive plays into triggering cascading effects anytime she suspends enemies in these massive gravity wells. You'll enjoy Harlowe if you want to play a character that focuses on control, like a lore bard, or if you ever played EverQuest, an enchanter. Lastly, we have Vex, the Siren. Every game has one, and this time around, Vex is primarily minion, or the primary minion focused hunter. While most characters have some minion play, Vex has an outright ability to summon her phase familiar, Trouble. You can then have Trouble do a ton of things like charging, phasing you to targets, summoning illusions. There's a lot of utility built into that minion. She can also duplicate herself as either a ranged or melee focused entity that then gets further bonuses depending on how you spec. She also can turn into basically a demon and just launch balls of destruction everywhere. But that's too long to watch this entire video. I know that's a lot longer than my usual TLDWs, but I wanted to give you a quick rundown of each character so you can decide without spoiling much of their abilities. Going into a game blind is the best, and don't worry about which of these characters performs the best, because Borderlands is always about the most ridiculous combinations you can pull off. I know that the title of this video says, I know the hyperbole of it all, but please play the game however you want, not what the internet says. If that's all you want to know though, please feel free to shut the video down. I want to be respectful of your time. You can navigate ahead to any part of this video that interests you the most using the chapters of the timeline in the description. Also, I'll be streaming Borderlands 4 on Twitch on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, doing a giveaway of the game. So come by and try and win a copy. Link in the description below. Let's get started on choosing the best character for you in Borderlands 4. Switching over here, let's talk about just some general rules so that you understand how the skills work in this game as a whole. I'm using the Mobalytics website, and so you can use this to do any of these builders. There's tons of builders out there, but this is the one that I use for my channel. So all of my builds will have a Mobalytics link to them. And I'll put a link below so you guys can actually take advantage of this. So every single Vault Hunter is going to have 3 abilities here. And those 3 abilities then correspond to 3 trees. If you want to call them talent trees, because it's an analog to World of Warcraft, that wouldn't be totally wrong. But what's important to know is that you basically choose one of these abilities. You can see here's all 3 of them. We'll just choose Arc Knives. And then from there, you're going to socket an Augment, which is one of these, and then eventually a Capstone, which is one of these. And you can just simply socket these in at any point. Now you can still use the other abilities, that's no problem. It's just knowing that those other abilities won't have augments or capstones in them. So you can still play with them, you can still use them, you can still invest points into those other trees, no problem, because you have a total of 49 points that can be allocated across all 3 trees. And eventually, as you kind of go through this, I'm just going to go ahead and bring all this down. You'll unlock a capstone, which will go right here. Capstones in general will not completely change the skill, but they will morph it to fit the focus of this bottom tree. Each one of these trees is then focused either on a particular element or a particular way of playing. And when you look at these little pictures, usually the background gives you an indication of what it's going to be. Like this is usually going to be cryo or shock. This is usually going to be corrosive. This is usually going to be either fire or kinetic. It's usually just fire. But you get some context clues. So that is just kind of a quick primer on all these. Another quick other thing too is you have these augments and these capstones, right? Everything else is a passive. So that's a really nice thing that you don't need to worry about. Hey, you know what? What does this do? Oh, I don't need to worry about it being active. It's just some sort of passive skill. And those passive skills will sometimes have modifiers attached to them, like that's an overdrive skill. So this will trigger when overdrive triggers. Some of them will say kill skill, like this one. Killing an enemy freezes overdrive's duration. So you can see that. And just 2 other little things are, there's always some sort of contextual modifier. So this tells me that this applies to this. Same thing with this one, or this one, or this one, because it's the same visual clue. Or if I look over here, I know that all these are drone abilities. They just usually have some sort of underlying thread that keeps them all together. And your last thing to know is every single Vault Hunter will have something like this. It is, I don't want to call it a passive, I don't want to call it an active, and I don't want to call it a augment or a capstone. Those are existing terms. So I'm going to call it an innate. This is an innate skill that your character has because that's just who your character is. And it will trigger off of a lot of the things that you do. So for example here, this will trigger off of your action skills. But if I were to switch this over to, let's just go Amon. Well, Amon's is huge. Let me just choose like Vex. Vex here, you can see, is attuned to elemental type of her current gun, converting all action skill and melee damage into that type. So that's just your kind of primer on how all the skills work. Let's jump into some more details now. So let's dive in on this and talk about our first Vault Hunter in Vex. So Vex is going to be a Vault Hunter that you can play that is very minion focused. Each and every one of the Vault Hunters does have minions it can play with, but Vex is the only one that has tons of minion-centric passives. So if you want to be a character that is, I don't want to say like a necromancer in a Diablo, because you're not going to be having huge amounts of minions, but it's mainly you're going to either have one really strong minion in your phase familiar called Trouble. In a lot of the videos you'll be seeing, it's this gigantic like void ethereal panther, or you use Dead Ringer. And Dead Ringer is going to allow you to choose between a Spectre, which is a ranged unit, or a Wraith. I'm sorry, or a Reaper. And the Reaper is a melee unit, so you can choose one or the other. And eventually you'll be able to evolve these capstones for these abilities. So you can make it so that your phase familiar Trouble has a big overshield and does elemental damage around you, or you can make it so that it will then summon up illusions of itself. And those illusions can become badasses if you're familiar with previous Borderlands. So they're really strong versions of them, and those reap around the battlefield for you. Or even over too, you can have it so that the phase familiar Trouble will mark targets and then will increase its amount of damage dealt over time and the amount of health that it regens, and you get additional gun damage against those marked targets. So you can have a lot of cascading effects with that. Now for Dead Ringer, you can make it so that you have stronger Spectres, and the Spectres duplicate your gun usage. So if you have a crazy ass gun that you're using, you can play a lot into that and have those Spectres give more gun damage out. And then furthermore too, these Spectres can kind of curse things or deliver more status effects to things. That's a big thing for her as a whole, is that Vex can do a lot of status effects. And then too, if you want to go with more of that melee route with the Dead Ringer ability, you go with Grim Reaper, and it allows you to summon up this huge Grim Reaper that will then spawn additional Reapers whenever it kills an enemy that it drains health from. So a lot of really sick mechanics built into that. Or if you want to not choose between one or the other, you can do something that's really unique. Is that we took a look at the augment and the capstone portion of the skill selection. Well, you can actually put 2 augments in Dead Ringer if you want, choosing the Last Tree Dark Pact. So that allows you a lot of really fun abilities for Vex. Now, the last thing that Vex gets access to is Incarnate. That's the other tree, that's the other ability, and it basically turns her into this flying demon vampire thing where you're going to do a ton of specific damage to targets. So if the other 2 things are minion focused, focusing on the minions doing damage and you doing damage as well, Incarnate allows you to do this big explosion around you and then to shoot these eldritch blasts, and you can determine if you want to focus on the blasts, on the explosion, or everything in between, because you can make it so that those phase explosions and the eldritch blasts create hazards and they deal a ton of damage and that they can actually home onto targets. Or you get another ability, that another capstone here, that makes it so that eldritch blast, rather than you just shooting it once and then it's on a recycle, it's got charges, so you can shoot it a bunch of times, well, up to 3, and that ricochets around and hits enemies, so it does a bunch of different style of damage. Or lastly, you can do Heart Piercer, so that your Eldritch Blast, rather than it being this big single nuke, it shoots a blast that then pierces through targets, and then it will restore health to allies. It's one of the very few support abilities in the game outside of Harlowe. Now, outside of all those things, you then have her innate ability, Phase Covenant. So this allows her to convert her action skill and melee to the type of element that her gun has. Every single character class has a focus on specific elements of damage. Vex is the only one that doesn't really have a focus on it, because her Phase Covenant, her innate, allows her to switch her element type to best suit the situation she needs. So if you want to be a minion class that does a lot of summoning and buffing up those minions, but also has a lot of range damage capabilities in Incarnate, then Vex is definitely going to be the Vault Hunter for you. Next up is our Rafa, and this is the character that I'll be playing probably the most of. Rafa is an Exo-Soldier that gets access to 3 pretty crazy abilities. Rafa's big thing first, though, is his innate ability in Overdrive. Basically, Overdrive works in every time you use an action skill, you're going to get a damage buff and a move speed buff. So this will allow you to really ramp up your damage, but you'll be moving around the battlefield at a crazy rate. So if you want very fast gameplay, this is going to be for you. Now, your 2 skills that are going to focus on ranged gameplay. It's a Peacebreaker Cannons and a Apophis Lance. So the Peacebreaker Cannons here, you've got 3 trees that you're going to jump into. You're either going to turn those cannons. Well, let me say this first. The cannons will act like, I guess I don't want to say artillery, but they're emplacements on your back that will shoot things automatically for you. So they'll basically go wherever your crosshairs are aiming, they're going to shoot damage onto those crosshairs, and they're going to switch whenever you kill something and find a new target. And then you can morph these things to be one tree that's going to focus on turning those cannons into shotguns, and then also giving them an additional ability to basically launch 2 large firebombs. You can have another branch that's going to turn those cannons into beam guns. So they'll shoot a corrosive beam or a shock beam. And furthermore, you can make it so within that same tree, you can take the cannons off your back and place them on the ground, and they'll be emplaced turrets that are a companion for you, which is a really sick amount of gameplay or difference to the actual to everything else. Then the last branch here for Rafa allows you to do these, it changes the cannons into now shooting rockets. So you do a bunch of splash damage, a bunch of different ways to approach it. And you've got homing rockets too. So a bunch of different things that you can do with that. Now the Apophis Lance is similar to the Eldritch Blast that we talked about with Vex, but the Apophis Lance is in your offhand, meaning that your main hand is free to use your gun as you wish, and the Apophis Lance will then shoot through targets. And you can morph this thing to either be a shotgun rather than a big singular blast that goes through things. It's a shotgun blast, or it can be a corrosive grenade launcher, lobs a big corrosive blob, or it can then be an incendiary laser beam that just shoots in a persistent beam through that pierces targets. So it's up to you on how you want to play that. And with that as well, too, in that same tree the tree that allows you to do the corrosive blob, you can get these drones that summon around you, and they'll allow you to basically take damage. The drones will take damage for you, and eventually you can morph them to attack targets for you. Now, the last tree or the last skill for Rafa is arc knives. And this is a pretty cracked out thing. So you basically just rip around the battlefield with these big, huge scything knives on the arms of your character, and you can determine how those work. With one tree, you can go kind of a spin to win, like a whirlwind style of build. That creates a singularity that marks targets, because you mark targets by hitting them with your arc knives. And by hitting them, you do bonus damage per mark. And then you can have a max of 4 at the very beginning. So basically, this gives you access to 32% increased damage by marking up to 4 targets. So it's pretty sweet. And using this, the spin to win, you just mark everything around you, and it draws them all into a singularity that does a bunch of shock damage, which is pretty cool. Or you basically make it so that you can absorb a bunch of damage, and then over time you can explode that damage out with your Blade Fury ability, which is the ability of the arc knives that you can use. So you'll slash around with a huge amount of increased incendiary damage. Or lastly, you've got this other ability with the arc knives called Galvanic Panic, which will enable you to use these little, we talked about the drones from the previous tree. Well, these have these little corrosive drones that will jump out every time you basically do a melee attack. They'll fire out and go blow up with a corrosive explosion. So you get to decide for Rafa. Do you want to be more of a passive ranged character with the guns on your back? Do you want to be more of an active ranged character that does a additional weapon that on top of the weapon you're shooting? So you're basically kind of dual wielding when you have it active. It's on a charge basis. Or do you want to be a insane melee combatant? So this is going to be the character for you if you want a much faster style of play. Rafa is going to be the fastest character out the gate, especially because there's so many ways with the passives to really amp up the overdrive. If Vex's passives amp up her companions, Rafa's passives amp up his overdrive to be tons more damage, tons more speed, a lot of different characteristics. Shifting gears here a bit, we have Harlowe. Now, Harlowe is I would say the dedicated support class of the 4 that we currently have access to. We will have 2 more Vault Hunters that are coming as part of the roadmap that they revealed, but the 3 branches, or I guess the 3 abilities that she's got, really favor a lot of support. Well, 2 more than the last one. But her innate ability is entanglement, so that whenever she uses her action skill at enemies, those enemies become entangled, and then entangled enemies then share damage, which is pretty cool. So gun and skill damage is then spread across all of them. So it's a lot of complexity, but that complexity leans into a lot of different directions. So her first big action skill is Flux Generator, which is going to give her this ability to throw this Flux Generator on the ground, and it'll give an energy field, and it'll deal crowd damage over time to enemies that are entangled. To enemies and entangling them. But allies inside that energy field, they'll gain overshield. So that's the first taste of some support. And then as we jump into some of the capstones for this ability, we get the ability for potential transference, which allows a big shock burst, deals shock damages to enemies inside, grants a free second wind to allies, and heals allies within the Flux Generator. That is, if you want to do support, that's what you'll probably go with, or the other branch we'll talk about in a second. But Violent Horizon will do this big amount of radiation damage. What's unique here is Harlowe is the only character that can do radiation-based damage through her skills. Maybe there's 1 or 2 other little things here and there that I forgot about, but usually people do corrosive. She does radiation. But Violent Horizon is another capstone for that ability that just shoots a bunch of radiation projectiles everywhere. Now, Group Study is the other one I was talking about that is support based. Basically, rather than summoning up this generator, you summon this Halo sidekick, which jumps around to all the allies and increases their gun damage, fire rate, reload speed. So it really jumps into all of those mechanics. And she has a lot of other augments that will further help out with the increased ally capability. Like she has Unified Theory, so basically the Flux Generator increases action skill damage, and this effect is increased based on how many allies and enemies are inside of the Flux Generator. So there's a lot of stuff that really leans into it. But she can do some direct damage, and she does that with her Chroma Accelerator, which is not too unlike a lot of the abilities we've talked about before. She'll basically shoot this large, unstable energy pocket that passes through enemies, dealing crowd damage, and then after a certain amount of time will explode and then do radiation damage. And she can kind of flex this thing around and make it so that that energy pocket with cue ball will bounce around. And as it bounces around, it won't pass through things. It'll eventually detonate rather than you manually detonating it. So you basically can just shoot this pinball of destruction that just jumps from enemy to enemy to enemy. Or you go with something like a Demon Core, and it will basically shoot a bunch of radiation darts everywhere as it passes through stuff. So you can really lean into that radiation damage. And in this tree, there's tons of bonuses to radiation damage through the forms of passives. So a lot of that which you can find on the Mobalytics website. When you look at that tree, you'll see lots of those little overlying benefits. Now, the last capability is Shattering Light, which allows you to basically change the way that that chroma accelerator works. Rather than you shooting one shot, you get 5 charges and you can shoot it more. So you'll be able to launch this thing, and that this is really your primary damage engine. Now, your other capability though is 0 point. Remember how I said that Harlowe is also a crowd control specialist? Well, at 0 point, she'll suspend people in a large gravity well, and this gives you the capability to then slam them on the ground and do a ton of damage. And you have an augment in here too, which can actually shoot out these homing rejuvenating projectiles that after enemies get slammed, killed, or put into stasis, that it will then increase their action skill, cooldown rate, duration, stuff like that. So you can, again, lean heavy into that support without the direct healing capabilities. And the capstones for this will allow you to it will allow you to put additional enemies into stasis. There's another one that allows you to do a big, huge singularity that is then a massive cryo explosion. And then the last one is Ground State, which allows you to slam an enemy onto the ground and then increase the amount of damage and increase the amount of radius that then is hit, or they do when they hit the ground. So basically it's a bigger explosion what they currently do. So Harlowe is what you're going to want to choose if you want to do more of a support style of build or support style of class. Now, that's not to say that she's purely support. You can simply take the latter 2 abilities, right? You take the 0 point and you do something with that, or you focus on the chroma accelerator and you focus on that. And I think that you'll find that you're going to be able to do plenty of damage as this character. But if you want to be the one in your group that's heals, supports, and resurrects, Harlowe is going to be the one for you. Last but certainly not least is the character I have the most time played with in Amon, which I assume is a reference to Amon Amarth, an amazing metal band. If you've not ever heard them, look them up. So Amon Amarth here, Amon is not just simply a brawler. He's not just simply a tank, but he is both those things. I would argue Amon is the most complex of the 4 launch Vault Hunters because a lot of his trees bleed together. What you want to look at when you play this character is really drilling down and looking at all of the things that are accessible to you via keywords. There's forge skills, there's forge waves, there's forge axes, there's forge swords, there's forge hammers. Any kind of keyword Amon can play around with either through additional augments or passive. So you really kind of have to know those things when you're looking at him. And his innate ability is called Forge Skill. So basically, every character gets 3 action skills, right? Well, whatever action skill you choose for Amon grants you an additional Forge skill. So think of him as constantly having access to 4 abilities. So the first ability here is Crucible, which will then grant you the Forge skill of Double Edge, and you'll morph those with your capstones. But Crucible, you launch a huge fire axe that is either flame. You launch 2 fire axes. One is flame, one is frost. So you have that choice. But this tree also allows you to have some minion play. You've got Forge drones that can be summoned up if you choose the passives that will then allow you that anytime you basically activate your Forge skill, you'll spawn an Axe Forge drone. There's another ability that summons up a Sword Forge drone. There's another ability that summons up a Hammer Forge drone. So you actually can have a lot of these really cool Forge drones in a class that is focused more on durability and brawling and tanking. The Crucible line is more your pure damage line, and you play around with that too by amping up with all these little drones that'll fire that'll just kind of go to a town and attack things for you. Now, the capstone abilities are Snowball, turning your Double Edge. Now, Double Edge is you put your axes together and you launch the axe at a target. It'll do fire damage. I'll do ice damage out and then fire damage in. Well, with Snowball, you get rid of Double Edge and now you use Snowball. You basically throw a huge twinned Forge Hammer that deals cryo damage. It has ricochets around, and it just basically causes tons of destruction. Your other capstone is Storm Surge. So Double Edge is now Storm Surge. It morphs that ability to do a big amount of shock damage and create this huge forge. I almost popped into Sean Connery. A Forge Storm on impact. So it creates this whirlwind of destruction that is doing shock damage to everything. And your last capstone is Conflangarang that will shoot an incendiary damage in both directions now and leave trails of fire. So you can see that is very damage focused. Now your other capability here is Scourge. That's your other action skill. And it brings a big forge shield in front of you. As you take damage, you build a vengeance meter. And that vengeance meter eventually converts to damage reduction. And you can also use that vengeance and set a forge wave out in front of you that will do a cone of damage outward that does cryo damage. And it launches a forge, dealing cryo ordnance damage to enemies it passes through. There we go. Passes through was the term I was looking for. And then you can morph this even further too, right? So you get Ring of Frostfire. So Firewall is your forge skill attached to Scourge. And you have this big ring that comes around you, and it helps protect you and your friends, because anytime that people walk through it, they get increased projectile damage. But now you get Ring of Frostfire, which does the same thing, but now you've got cryo and frost attached to it. So it does a little bit more fun in there. Firewall is now a ring that deals incendiary status effect damage to enemies inside of it and cryo damage to enemies who enter or leave. Then we've got Glacial Rupture is another capstone for this. So if you've played God of War, you know how this works. So Firewall is now Glacial Rupture. You take these two whips and slap them into the ground like you would as Kratos using his chains, right? So you just bring those two things down and it shoots a big wave of cryo out in front of you, the big fissure as it were. Your last one is Wrathfall, which has this huge sword come and plunge down into something and does a ton of critical damage. So if you want to build into crit damage, you would focus on this. Now, our last action skill for Amon is Onslaughter, and this gives you basically a falcon punch. You overload your Forge Fist. It gives you shield regen, bonus incendiary damage with your guns, but then you just do a big rocket punch. You dash forward and do a short range cone damage that then staggers targets. And you can have a lot of fun with this too, buffing it up and changing how this works. It's worth noting too with Scourge, that's your tank ability. So you can do an AoE taunt with one of the augments. This isn't necessarily, it's a melee brawling build with Onslaught, but you are also very tanky because of the nature of Onslaughter is what it's called. It turns you into someone that's constantly regenning your shields. So you use Horcleave because Molten Slam is your forge skill. You get a big two-handed forge sledge and just slap the ground and do a ton of damage. But now, and fire damage as you would imagine, now with Horcleave you do frost damage and launch out a massive forge wave. Forge wave, which we talked about, was in the previous chain. So that's what I mean by there's a lot of tree bleed in this build. You can, or I'm sorry, with Amon, you jump to different trees to try to get augments to certain aspects, like a forge wave, or getting aspect bonuses towards other things that you might have heard, like, oh, okay, this will do something for forge axes. Well, what other things benefit forge axes that aren't in this tree? I want those things. So Amon is a very complex character. Outside of that, the other two capstones are Molten Royal, which you store up damage and then just basically burst it out in a massive incendiary melee damage thing. And then a Storm Cutter, which allows you to use a big forged sword to deal shock damage to all enemies that in this big forge wave that you let out that passes through them. So Amon is very defensive. But you can see he's also very offensive as well. And he's very brawlery. He gets up close and personal. He's kind of got that monk aspect from Onslaughter. And Onslaughter 2 is a Berserk. There's a Berserk passive in there on the first tree that we talked about. So you can go absolute apeshit crazy. But I think that this is going to be the one class that a lot of people struggle with. If you want to be the tank of the group, this is going to be the one for you. But if you do that, make sure you focus on the things that are tank specific. I think it's going to be easy for people to take them on, get lost in the weeds of which abilities do what or which passives help what, and they're not going to jump to enough of the other skill trees to get the most benefit out of them. So it really requires you to read all the passives, read all the augments, and read all those capstones to see how you can really stack a lot of the benefits. And I'll be putting up a build here for you guys so you can take a look at how, like, what an example of what that would look like. But again, Amon is going to be for you if you're looking for a kind of hardier tank style of character that is going to have some range play by throwing axes, but is really going to be at home just smashing things to pieces with all of his different forge hammer swords and maces, whatever it is. But at that, it brings our video here to a close. So we've covered all 4 of the launch Vault Hunters. I know, again, like I said, we're going to be getting 2 more in due time, so we'll see what those Vault Hunters will be like. And this video is going to come down to how you want to approach the game. Do you want to be the tanky character? Do you want to be a ranged support character? Do you want to be a minion character? Do you want to be just a chaotic melee all up in everyone's face character? There is a playstyle for those. And even within the existing characters, there's even more playstyle and nuance to them. You could be a melee character with Vex. You can be a melee character with Harlowe. You can be a ranged character just as well with Rafa or with Amon. It's going to come down to the action skills you want to choose, the augments that are going to go into them, and then the capstones that are going to further augment that augment into that action skill. So don't get too lost in the weeds. Take a look at the characters on a pretty high level, like this video kind of does. Choose one that looks cool, and then fucking play it. Who cares what the internet says about this is the best one? This is the best one if you're brand new to the game. Don't mind any of that crap. See which one looks interesting to you, because it's going to be the one that you stay with and want to actually carry to the end game. And the end game in Borderlands 4 is a lot different. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more creative. It's not just simply running missions over and over again. You can just spawn the bosses over and over again, but there's even more nuance to it this time around that is going to allow you to really have fun in that end game without just going, okay, I've reached the end game. I'm kind of bored now. I've one-shotted bosses. Let me start a new character. So you'll be able to have a lot more fun. And also too, with the way that the character system works, that is also a little bit different. So go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. What will you be playing in Borderlands 4 when it launches tomorrow and this weekend? What's your first character you are going to jump into? Don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I'm doing giveaways of the game, linked below on my description and pinned comment for that Twitch link. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.